CEO Daddy. Chapter 1285, What I Am Willing to Do for You. Alvina had already escaped upstairs, but Joseph's soul had not returned to his body. The face that she had suddenly punched over seemed to still have a trace of a sweet fragrance remaining. After pondering for a long time, Joseph couldn't help but curl his lips. Why did he come here on such a windy and snowy night? Wasn't it just to give her a light kiss? As he thought about his own thoughts, Joseph Grant felt slightly embarrassed. As a man, he was actually scheming against a little girl. Alvina Miller squatted in her bathroom, rolled up her sleeves, and tried out the water temperature. The men's bathroom was very simple. Aside from the necessities, there were no other decorations. The bathtub was new, pure white, the warm water sprinkled in, causing a mist to rise, and even the glass mirror beside it became misty. Before Alvina Miller's heartbeat became as usual, she took the initiative again. Oh my God, did he think that she is becoming more and more casual? No. The next time it must be him who took the initiative. She must hold it in, and keep the virtue of being a female. Just as Alvina Miller was thinking about this, and giving herself all sorts of education, there was a snap at the door of the bathroom. Joseph took off his coat and walked in wearing only a white shirt. It was warm inside, but not cold. Alvina Miller also only had a thin, long knitted sweater on her body, wrapping around her slender body. Her long hair was casually tied up behind her head and she looked pure and clean, like a lotus blooming in water. Their gazes met unexpectedly, both of them looking a little embarrassed from what they had just done. Originally, this bathroom was considered big, but when Joseph walked in, Alvina Miller actually felt that it was difficult to even turn around, so narrow that it could not accommodate the both of them. Do you want to try the water's temperature? I don't know how hot the water is for you. In a moment of desperation, Alvina Miller quickly pulled back her reason and found a topic to ask him. The man walked over and lightly touched it with his finger. This is okay. Isn't it too hot? I'm afraid of the cold. It's so hot to bathe every day, Alvina Miller casually said with a smile. No, that's good. Joseph also felt that the air in the bathroom had suddenly become thinner. His eyes subconsciously focused on her lowered face. When he saw her blushing appearance, his heart shook and he had the impulse to forcefully drag her into his embrace. Then, wash yourself first. Call me if you need anything. I'll be right outside. Alvina Miller felt that she should not be standing here, so she tactfully left. Alvina, can you help me? My hand can't move too much. Seeing that she was about to leave, Joseph Grant became anxious, and blurted out the question, but in truth, his ability to endure pain was a top-notch. At work, he was calm and at ease, but in front of Alvina, he had become a patient. How can I help you? Alvina Miller was really easy to trick. In her opinion, after getting cut by the sharp thorn, even a bit of blood would be painful. Joseph Grant's wound was so deep, and even so much blood had been spilled. Thus she was unable to move. Can you help me take off my clothes? Joseph Grant did not dare to request for more. Of course, there's no problem. Alvina Miller immediately walked over, and with a serious face, she reached out her hand to help him undo the buttons on his shirt. At this moment, when she thought about how his hand was injured so badly, she didn't dare to have any other thoughts. Thus, even if he was unbuttoning his shirt, she still maintained a straight face. However, what were those two burning gazes above her head? She clearly didn't feel flustered even when she was unbuttoning his clothes, but when his eyes lit up, she felt short of breath and her mouth became dry. That, Joseph Grant, have you eaten dinner? Alvina Miller could only bear with the scorching pressure and try to find a topic to talk. If I say no, will you help me do it immediately? Joseph Grant asked as his thin lips curled up playfully. However, you know my cooking skills. I'm afraid that you won't dare to eat it. Alvina Miller also laughed along. As long as you feed me something, even if it's poison, I'll eat it. The man's voice suddenly became quiet, and the words that he said agitated Alvina Miller's extremely weak mind. She could not help but roll her eyes at him. What do you take me for? How could I possibly feed you poison? If you eat it even though you know it's poison, then you're stupid. Joseph Grant almost laughed when he saw that Alvina was making fun of his words. Alvina, do you understand the meaning behind my words just now? Joseph Grant felt that her comprehension ability was definitely not good. Of course Alvina Miller understood. A man who dared to eat poison. Could it be that he wanted to say that he was willing to die for her? However, she didn't want him to make such a sacrifice. She wanted him to live a good life. Live a life that was more wonderful than anyone else, and live a long life that was even longer than 100 years. I don't understand, and I don't want to understand so much. Alvina Miller pouted and said softly. Joseph Grant's heart was startled, his handsome face suddenly showing signs of urgency. His large palm suddenly reached over and grabbed on Alvina's small hand that was still unbuttoning his clothes. He apologized with a low voice. Sorry, did I say something wrong to piss you off? Alvina Miller's expression lit up. She raised her watery eyes and looked at him. Seeing the nervousness and uneasiness on him, she giggled. Why are you being so serious? I'm not angry. But your tone just now clearly showed that you're angry. Joseph Grant was really worried that he wouldn't know how to speak and he had pissed her off. No, I'm just a bit sad. Joseph Grant, you don't need to view me as more important than your life. In this world, there is no one else more important than your own life. Alvina Miller's voice became softer and softer, because she felt that what he said was not right. If there really came a day when she had to make a choice between them, she would think of him as more important than her. For you, I will cherish my life. Since I've decided to live with you for my entire life, I definitely won't give this opportunity to another man. Joseph Grant clenched and tightened his grip on his big palm, his tone becoming much more determined than before. All right, let's stop talking. The water is getting cold. Let go of my hand. Alvina Miller felt the feathers in her heart scratching as she held his hand. It felt itchy, and it made her very nervous. Seeing her pouting, Joseph Grant heaved a sigh of relief. At the same time, he loosened his grip on her large hand. The shirt was carefully taken off, and Alvina Miller even deliberately weighed the tip of her foot. But when she saw that there was no more blood on the wound on his arm, she secretly heaved a sigh of relief. Joseph Grant saw all of her minute movements, and was extremely happy in his heart. The next step was the men's western pants. They were custom made and of excellent quality. His long, slender, straight legs were well built and powerful. It made the woman's heart race even more. Do you feel difficult? Seeing her lowered her head in a daze, Joseph Grant immediately smiled and asked, No, aiding others is the basis of happiness. Alvina Miller raised her head and laughed, her two small hands immediately reaching towards his belt. However, she didn't know how to undo it. her two small hands just randomly pressing on it a few times, before relaxing, allowing herself to wipe off the sweat on her forehead. "You are already sweating, and you're only helping me take off my clothes. Is it that hot?" The man couldn't help but tease her. Alvina Miller revealed the fine beads of sweat on her forehead. It really was unbearably hot. The bright lights on top of her head revealed the fine beads of sweat on her forehead. It really was unbearably hot. Alvina Miller laughed dryly. "I give you everything for the first time and you're still making fun of me." Joseph Grant was startled. "This is the first time I've helped a man. Do you understand? After all, I'm not the Holy Maiden." Alvina Miller frankly admitted that she was sweating nervously. Joseph Grant suddenly felt ashamed that he had misunderstood her, but he still liked to imagine what kind of things she would give him during her so-called first time. The moment the pants fell, Alvina Miller immediately turned around and said softly, "You settle it yourself. I'll go out first." "Thank you." The man threw a word at us in a low and forceful voice. Alvina Miller felt that she deserved it, so she left, closed the door, and covered her burning cheeks. She and Joseph Grant carefully probed each other's feelings, and openly enjoyed the sweetness and thrill of love. This kind of life was even more impressive than the 20-odd years she had lived. Chapter 1286, Shame on You. Joseph Grant stayed in the bathroom for more than half an hour before he came out. When he came out, he was wearing a deep purple robe, and his body looked even taller and straighter than before. Alvina Miller sat on the sofa at the side, holding a mobile phone, but her entire person was in a daze. Hearing the man's voice, she acted like she was a thief. She quickly pretended to look down at her phone, but she didn't expect that she took the phone on the back. Joseph Grant had sharp eyes. He had seen all her uncomfortable expression for a long time. In his eyes, Alvina Miller had always been like a transparent crystal. From the very first time he saw her, Joseph Grant had seemed to be able to see through her from the moment he saw her. But even he saw through her. It was fate for him, the attraction she exuded. When he met her naivety, his deep cover exploded like a firework meeting dry wood. He couldn't resist her simplicity, while she was confused and fascinated by his maturity and steadiness. "Will you stay in my room tonight?" Joseph Grant's serene eyes congealed, and then, he boldly asked her. "It can't be. This will affect our sleep. Last time we slept together, you didn't seem to be sleeping well at all." Alvina Miller immediately stood up, and since he had already taken a safe bath, it was time for her to leave. "But I want to be in bed with you," Joseph Grant had to say. Even if he did not sleep well last time, he was still happy in the whole day. He was willing to bear the cost of losing sleep, and he also wanted to embrace her and feel her gentle aura. Really, Alvina Miller's beautiful eyes lit up. She didn't think that this man would say such frivolous words, but she was actually happy with what he had said. She must have been blinded by his love for. "Oh, don't worry. I won't be reckless." It was as if all men loved to say those words. Other men did not dare to guarantee it, but the words that Joseph Grant said would definitely be too kind. Alvina Miller pouted. "Your hands are still injured. Even if you want to do something, you desire to, but you don't have the strength." The man's expression instantly stiffened. His pair of charming eyes immediately focused on the woman's face. When he saw her pouting mouth and her slapping words, his handsome face instantly changed. "What do you say?" Joseph Grant's voice dropped. If one were to listen carefully, they would be able to hear a trace of unhappiness and danger. I don't say anything, since you don't mind me. Then wait for me for a while. I'll go take a bath first. Alvina Miller did not dare to repeat what she said just now, and immediately turned and ran away. Joseph Grant's breath was still unstable. The pride of a man could not be questioned by his beloved woman. This was his bottom line. Although his heart felt stuffy, the man still consciously sat on the bed and decided to warm the bed for her again. Alvina Miller slowly walked in. She was wearing a pair of wine-red pajamas and a thick beige robe. She walked to the side of the bed and was about to sit down when she saw the man move over again, allowing her the spot where he was lying just now. Go to sleep. The man's tone returned to gentleness. Okay. Alvina Miller smiled, her smile blooming like a flower. She quickly went to the other side of the bed and lay down under her warm bed. The lights are off. With that, the man put out his hand and extinguished all the lights. The room immediately turned pitch black. They were separated by a certain distance, and once the lights were turned off, they would inexplicably feel lonely. Alvina Miller blinked her beautiful eyes, feeling the calm aura of the man in the darkness, and then, she moved towards him bit by bit. What's wrong? Isn't it warm enough? The man couldn't help but tease her when he felt her approach on her own accord. No, I just want to sleep with you, Alvina Miller boldly said. Joseph directly extended his arm under her head, and Alvina Miller directly jumped into his embrace. This time, it was truly warm. Alvina, do you question my manhood just now? Since she was being so frank, Joseph Grant would not hesitate to ask. No, I don't. Alvina Miller immediately denied it and pretended to be stupid. Joseph Grant reached out and pinched her pretty face, causing the girl to scream in pain and pinch his arm. Then, she felt that something was wrong. Isn't your hand unable to move? How could you twist and twist me just now? Alvina Miller asked him in a stifled tone. Joseph Grant's strong body stiffened. He was done for. He had revealed his shameless actions. You lied to me. I saw you signing today. Joseph Grant, you actually dared to lie to me. The more Alvina Miller thought about it, the more she felt that something was off. In the end, she finally realized that something was off and angrily punched him twice on the chest. The man let out a low laugh. This laughter had already admitted his crime. Why do you lie to me? Alvina Miller chased closely. Because I want to spend more time with you. Joseph Grant's reason was actually sweet. Liar, Alvina Miller cursed, but her small hands went behind his back and hugged him tightly. I won't dare to do it again. Joseph Grant was really afraid that she would be angry. He immediately guaranteed. However, Alvina Miller laughed, and said in his embrace with a muffled voice, it's fine. For something like this, it's fine even if I come a few more times, since I can pretend to be stupid. Alvina, why are you different from the other girls? Your actions are sometimes too audacious. Joseph Grant also laughed, and asked her curiously, if I was like them, then I wouldn't be the unique Alvina Miller. Would you still like me? The girl raised her head from his embrace. A pair of bright eyes, even in the darkness, glimmered with an enchanting light. No matter what kind of person you are, I'm already in love with you. Joseph Grant lifted her head, and his lips were already attached to her. Alvina Miller did not expect him to kiss her suddenly, and was startled. But by the time she reacted, it was already too late. The man had already curled his lips into a violent storm, leaving her with no strength to defend him. In the darkness, It was as if he could make people bold. There were many things he didn't dare to do that could be covered up by the darkness, allowing him to do whatever he wanted. Unknowingly, Joseph Grant had already suppressed the petite girl, and his thin lips refused to let go of any of her sweetness. Alvina Miller's mind was a field of blankness. Her body tightened to a string. She didn't know why she wasn't afraid in the slightest. And even she was crazier than him. Enough, Alvina. Take your hand away. All of a sudden, the man's voice came from the darkness. Alvina Miller seemed to wake up from her dream, and realized that where should she put her hands? No, 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 this was definitely not her hand. She wanted to chop off this hand and let it break. Alvina Miller quickly turned her back, and did not dare to face the man anymore, even though it was dark now, and no one could see her expression. She just felt extremely embarrassed. Joseph Grant snickered from behind her. His laughter was low and magnetic, shaking the girl's weak nerves. Joseph Grant, if you laugh again, I will go back to my room to sleep. The girl became angry from embarrassment. All right, I won't laugh. I'm not laughing at you. I'm happy. The man forced a reason to comfort her. What are you so happy about? It's all your fault. However, Alvina Miller was thin-skinned. Her actions just now were too excessive. Even she felt ashamed for herself. All right, I won't tease you anymore. Sleep early. You still have a new job to do tomorrow, so don't be discouraged. Joseph Grant gently patted her back, as if he was coaxing her to sleep. No, my heart is unbalanced. I have to bite you. After Alvina Miller finished speaking, without saying a word, she grabbed Joseph's hand and actually bit into it. Joseph Grant knew that she must be extremely embarrassed, for she had no idea how to let go of her anger. He had deliberately given her the back of his hand to bite on, and furthermore, this woman had even said that she would bite on him, but the real thing was not too hard. It was more like she was kissing him. I fall asleep. Alvina Miller pushed his hands away and hugged herself tightly. Although no one could clearly see each other's expression in the darkness, she could feel her own reaction. Oh my God, Joseph Grant must definitely laugh at her. He hadn't even made a move yet, but she had. How embarrassing. In the morning, Alvina Miller's leg was on the man's waist. She was sleeping soundly like a pig. Her sleep quality had always been good. Even if it was nighttime and thunder, she wouldn't wake up. Chapter 1287. I want to be in love with Dad. It was early in the morning and the fog outside the window was thick. A few branches could be vaguely seen. The scenery was so beautiful that it was hard to shake. Alvina Miller turned over her body drowsily, her two small hands habitually hugging onto something. However, she discovered that this time, she was hugging onto an arm that was as warm as a furnace, causing her to immediately wake up. Her long, feather-like eyelashes trembled twice before she lifted them away. What entered her eyes was the gentle gaze of a man. Alvina Miller's small mouth gaped in surprise. Lowering her head, she realized that she was hugging onto one of his sturdy arms. She quickly loosened her grip as if she was scolding it, pushing it back to his side. Morning. The man seemed to have woken up a long time ago, but he looked lazy when he woke up. Even his voice was a little hoarse. Alvina Miller laughed awkwardly. She pretended to be calm and took off the blanket, but she was scared and hid under the blanket. She extended her hand and pulled at the robe on the side and quickly put it on. While tying it up, she looked at the man who was lying down casually. Why haven't you gone to work yet? I have other arrangements for the afternoon. There's no need to rush there. The man's deep and gentle voice sounded. Oh, dating a beauty. Alvina Miller started to joke around very early in the morning. If I wanted to date you, would you consider taking a leave of absence? The man asked. But I just go to the new department and apply for leave the next day. Would I not have a good impression of it? Alvina Miller was really considering this matter. Then forget it. Let's meet again next time when we are free. Joseph Grant also flipped himself over and sat up. Last night, he was wearing dark pajamas when he slept. But at this moment, he did not seem to be afraid of the cold. He stood up and walked towards the bathroom. Alice, wait a moment. Hearing that he was giving up, Alvina Miller's spirits were lifted, and she ran over to block his path. I'm requesting for a leave of absence right now. Where are we going? Joseph Grant only wanted to tease her a little, but he didn't expect her to actually take it seriously, and an apologetic look flashed across his handsome face. Alvina, my arrangements are very important at the noon. You can ask for leave, but I might not. You're lying to me. Alvina Miller's beautiful eyes instantly grew twice as big, and after that, she said angrily, I don't want to make an appointment with you. Alvina, don't be angry. I am wrong. I shouldn't joke with you like this. Joseph Grant's handsome face tensed up, and his long arms stretched over. It was his injured hand. Alvina Miller turned her head around, only to see that it was his injured hand pulling his wrist. She couldn't shake him, nor could shake him. She could only reply with a cold face, I'm not angry, but your expression is clearly, give me a present and I'll pretend that this never happened. After Alvina Miller said that, she gently pushed away his palm and left with large strides. Joseph Grant was stunned. This woman was bold enough to actually ask for a gift herself. However, she was also straightforward and cute, making people not need to think twice to guess. Joseph Grant's thin lips curled up as he started to think about what kind of gift he should give her. When Alvina Miller went to work, she found out at noon that Joseph Grant had actually accompanied the foreign ambassador to play golf. In order to break the rumors about his injuries, the news had spread internally. Others who heard it felt lucky that the Mr. Vice President was strong, but when Alvina Miller heard it, all of the blood in her body froze. Joseph Grant's arm was injured. The wound from 2 days ago was still bleeding. Why did he accompany others to play golf today? Was he tired of living? Alvina Miller's mind was buzzing. She could not hear what the people around her were saying. She only had one thought, and it was that Joseph Grant had gone crazy. Alice. Alvina Miller lowered her head and hastily walked forward, but accidentally bumped into a person who was holding a blueprint in her hand that fell to the ground. Alvina Miller was startled, and quickly apologized repeatedly. It's okay. It's just that the next time you walk, I have to bring your eyes with me. A melodious voice of a woman sounded, neither cold nor hot. Alvina Miller quickly swept a glance over the diagrams, and discovered that all of them were famous diagrams, and upon hearing this Oriole-like female voice, she suddenly raised her head, and saw a face that he seemed to have seen before. Be more careful next time. This is Miss Olivia. She's a painter we hired. A staff member at the side warned Alvina Miller softly. Alvina Miller hurriedly nodded. I'm so sorry. I am thinking about something just now. I'll pay attention the next time. It's okay. I'm fine. Olivia's gaze swept across Alvina Miller's face and instantly recognized her. If one were to say that everyone in the office did not know that she was Joseph Grant's fiancée, it would be different to Olivia, who knew her because she not only knew of her existence, but also knew her appearance and the relationship between her and Joseph Grant. Alvina Miller's eyes met Olivia's, and Alvina realized that the other person was staring at her and sizing her up. That gaze was not friendly, but instead seemed to be comparing, causing her to feel displeased. As Olivia watched Alvina Miller leaving, she couldn't help but sneer in her heart. Alvina Miller was considered a beautiful girl, but there were a lot of beautiful women in the inner court. All of them had elegant temperaments and were well learned, so it was not easy for Alvina Miller to be outstanding from here. Olivia felt that the only thing she had lost to Alvina was her age. She knew that Alvina Miller had just 23 this year while she was about to step into the age of 26. A difference of 3 years wasn't considered obvious between women, but it was still a hurdle that could not be overcome. Olivia swept up her jet black hair. A mature and charming woman had her own merits. Joseph Grant had a stable personality and was young and experienced. He probably liked women like Olivia, who was confident and elegant, who had a successful career. It was impossible for him to fancy a young miss like Alvina Miller, who was a headstrong person. Thus, Olivia became inexplicably confident in herself. When Alvina Miller returned to the office, she was still restless. She didn't want to work because of unhappy. She kept a close eye on Joseph Grant's situation, but she only knew that he had gone to play golf with the foreign leaders. She knew nothing else. The weather wasn't too good, so the golf course was definitely cold. She was speechless. Why was he playing in such a cold weather? Could it be that someone was scheming against Joseph Grant, trying to test if he was hurt? After thinking about it for a while, she still couldn't think of a reason, so she decided not to think about it anymore. In the villa of Wilson Family Villa, Claire and the two little fellows dressed as buns and made snowmen in the garden. They all had a holiday in advance, enjoying pleasure and leisure of the day. "Mummy, brother brings snow to smash my face. It's so cold," Emma cried as she ran in front of Claire to complain. "I don't do it on purpose," afraid that he would be scolded by the mummy. Frank immediately ran over to explain. "You do it on purpose, HMPH. Emma's two little hands were stuck into her waist, but because her clothes were too thick, her two little hands couldn't bend over, like a small ball. It was very cute." Frank shrugged his shoulders, looking like he was helpless against her. "Stupid scoundrel." Emma unwillingly bent down and grabbed a handful of snow, then smashed it onto Frank's body. Frank was already prepared for this, and immediately ran off. While Emma dragged her small body, she chased after him. Claire ignored the two little fellows' teasing. She was designing a model for her snowman group. "Mummy, is this my father?" Emma couldn't catch up with her brother, so she breathed heavily and ran over, pointing at Claire's masterpiece as she asked, "Yeah, does it look like your dad?" Claire smiled and asked her daughter. "It doesn't look like him at all. Daddy isn't that ugly, and he isn't that short either," Emma said with a serious face. Claire looked at the sky speechlessly. How was she going to explain such a thing to her daughter? "Mummy, where is my brother and I?" Emma walked around the snowman, not realizing that she was with his brother's snowman. Don't you and your brother just build your own snowman?" "I don't." Frank stood in the distance and laughed. "Idiot Emma, you still don't know that in the mummy's heart, Daddy already has a feeling of existing even more than us." Emma's pair of big black eyes immediately became watery and wide open. Her small mouth also became flat. Mummy doesn't love Emma anymore. Claire immediately needed a snowball and threw it towards her son, who was speaking nonsense. I ask you to do things more, speak less. Frank dodged quickly and burst out laughing. Claire hurriedly squatted and gently kissed her daughter's forehead. Emma, you have always been the most important in the heart of Mummy. Then between me and Dad, who is more important? The little girl asked, blinking her big eyes. Of course, it's you, Claire coaxed her. At this moment, a dejected voice came from behind her. It seems that I am the least important in this family. Chapter 1288, Reconciliation with Life. Daddy, Emma, who was feeling wronged before, she immediately rushed over when she heard Dempsey's voice. She only reached up to Dempsey's knees before, but now she had grown even taller, looking like a little girl. Dempsey gently squatted down and gently brushed off the few strands of snowflakes on her hair with his finger. Does brother bully you again? Well, he hit me in the face. With her father's help, the little girl immediately complained again. I will help you teach him a lesson later. Dempsey, who doted on his daughter, would never allow anyone to bully his daughter like this, even if that person was his son. Daddy, look. There's a snowman piled by Mummy. She said it's like you. The little girl immediately grabbed her father's big palm happily and ran towards Claire. Claire was wearing a bright red down jacket and stood on top of the white snow. Claire was young, and this red made her look even more charming. Her long hair was also fluffed up at her sides, revealing her small, white, jade-like face. No matter how she looked at it, it made Dempsey want to pinch her face. Claire turned her around in embarrassment and puffed up her cheeks. Claire, you get up so early in the morning just to make me a snowman. The man stood by her side, tall and straight, accentuated the delicateness of a woman. No, this is not you, but the appearance of your son when he grew up. Claire was embarrassed. She did not want to admit that it was him. Well, when my son grew up, wasn't he like me? So, you still think of me as a reference, don't you? Dempsey instantly became a narcissist. Mummy, why don't you admit that it is father's? Do you say it is him just now? Emma spoke the truth from the side. Claire glared at her daughter. The little girl shrank back and quickly ran away. Emma had a bad feeling that she had disturbed the good things in Mummy. Dempsey looked at the little girl standing under the snow, and gently stroked the long hair on her face. It's obviously me, but you won't admit it. When can you change your awkward disposition? Claire's face heated up and shyly lowered her head. Are you really not going out today? She whispered. Yeah. Tonight I'll get Josh to bring his girlfriend here for dinner, so I won't go anywhere today. I'll play with you all for one day. Dempsey reached out and pulled her into his embrace, then kissed her head. Really? Would Eliza come over? Grandma agreed to it. Claire's beautiful eyes lit up. Ever since Elizabeth had gotten pregnant, the old lady's attitude had softened a lot. And she had even asked someone to deliver several things over to Eliza. Even Lorena had secretly prepared a lot of baby items. The family all had their own personalities, but all of them were kind. I was just talking about this with my grandparents. Of course they would agree, Dempsey said with a light smile. Great. Now, Eliza can give birth to a child peacefully. Or she can marry your brother earlier, and form a warm family to welcome the arrival of a baby. Claire was relieved for them and sincerely wished them well. Yeah, I've already missed the two kids' infancy. I don't wish for my brother to have such a chance. I will fight for everything I can for him." Dempsey looked into the distance, where the two little fellows were squatting on the ground for unknown reasons, and playing with them very seriously. Claire blinked her beautiful eyes, and suddenly said, "Do you really feel like this is a lingering fear?" What Dempsey saw that the children were in a daze, and when he heard her sudden question, Dempsey immediately stared at her. "Do you really want to feel the life of your children when they were born?" Claire squinted her eyes and smiled. "Of course I want to. This is the kind of life that every father wants to experience," Dempsey replied. "Then, when all of this is over, let's have another child," Claire said hesitantly. Really, Dempsey's beautiful eyes instantly lit up, and his long arm hugged her tightly. He then asked beside her ear in ecstasy, "Are you really willing to give me another child?" As long as it isn't a twin or a phoenix." Claire was really afraid of sending another two, even if she really couldn't handle them. Even if she had the money and resources right now, she still wouldn't have enough energy to educate her children. "I do not feel it. It's good to have two more." Dempsey then looked at the children, and laughed to his heart's content. "You think too highly of yourself." The two little fellows are going to cry to you at the same time. Let's see if you can still say such words. Claire was an experienced person. She knew very well that the two little fellows weren't easy to deal with. "Claire, it is difficult for you to endure the discomfort of another pregnancy. Sometimes I think that two children are actually enough, that there are boy and girls, and they grow up together, so I don't want you to suffer anymore." It seemed that Claire was afraid of giving birth and raising children, so Dempsey instantly changed his mind. He didn't want her to suffer this kind of pain again. "What? Do you feel sorry for me?" Claire immediately laughed. "Yeah," the man nodded seriously. "We'll talk about it later. Actually, I also want to have more children. These two little guys are growing up and don't stick to me anymore. I suddenly miss the feeling of them hugging me even when they were sleeping, and their expressions when they were learning. The older they are, the more they have their own thoughts. In the future, they will definitely be even further away from us." Claire was touched. "So, you want another child?" Continue sticking to you. Dempsey didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "I like the feeling of being stuck by this little guy." Claire nodded and said seriously, "Then, when all these matters have concluded, shall we consider it?" Seeing that she had thoughts of having children, Dempsey wanted another one as well. "All right, we still have to ask the other two for their opinion. It won't be that easy to get a child." Claire chuckled. "If it's just the two of us, then of course it's easy. But this is a big family matter," Dempsey whispered into her ear. "Indecent." Claire blushed red and immediately pushed him away, running towards the children. Dempsey laughed out loud behind her. He was extremely pleased with himself. In the warm bedroom, Elizabeth was folding her clothes. Looking at the man who was leisurely drinking coffee at the side, she asked, "Does your grandma really agree to let me go over for dinner?" "Yes, my brother said so. I will talk to Grandma later." "Eliza, don't worry. My grandma will definitely not oppose this." Joshua put down the coffee, walked to her side, and placed her folded clothes inside the wardrobe. He turned around, looked at the woman's gentle and beautiful eyes, and couldn't help but kiss. "Tonight, I'll find a chance to bring up our marriage." And Elizabeth was frightened. Hence she was agreed to go over for dinner. While he was just thinking about getting married, wasn't it just asking for a scolding? Since the child is about to be born, of course we have to get married quickly. I want to give the child a complete family. I absolutely can't let anything go wrong. Joshua knew that her reaction must be huge, but he had to consider this point. Of course I have no objections, but I'm afraid that your family will not be able to accept it. How about we not mention it for now? We'll talk about it later, Elizabeth said anxiously. All right, let's not talk about this tonight, but you're already 5 months pregnant. At the end of next year's spring, our child will be born, and we'll have to prepare for this wedding for over a month. We really don't have enough time. Joshua smiled as he looked at her. A woman who was stubborn in the past had learned how to endure more and more, learned how to think for others. Elizabeth looked at him with her beautiful eyes, and she was at a loss of what to do. Listen to me, and I'll make sure that you and the child are justified. Okay, Joshua coaxed gently. Okay? Other than nodding, Elizabeth didn't seem to know what else to do. As the night approached, the winter night seemed to stretch on for a long time. Elizabeth was wearing a warm overcoat as she sat on the car. Joshua drove the car personally. He no longer liked the sports car, but rather a large SUV that had a very high safety factor. Elizabeth looked at the night scenery outside of the window with a bustling and dazzling appearance, but her heart was growing calmer and calmer. In this period of time, she had found her biological parents, but she had to endure their departures, so she firmly believed that in the future, her heart would grow stronger, and she would cherish everything she acquired more and more. Chapter 1289, Final Test. In the Wilson family villa, the lights were all on. Old Mrs. Wilson sat in the living room and watched the two grandchildren as they drove around the living room. She was in a peaceful mood and would occasionally smile along with the little guy's expression. Lorena came down from the stairs and looked at the time. It was already dark outside the window. His youngest son said that he wanted to bring his girlfriend back for dinner, so they should be there soon. Claire brought out a laptop and sat on the sofa in Dempsey's study. Both of them still had matters to take care of, so the study was especially quiet. Only the sound of Claire's fingers touching the keyboard and the orders of Dempsey made by phone could be heard. Suddenly, the sound of a car came from outside the window. Claire raised her eyes and looked at the man for a moment. Then Dempsey placed down the pen in his hand, stood up and tidied up his clothes. They should be here. Let's go and take a look. Okay. Claire stretched her back, realizing that there was something wrong with working at home. It was that she could be lazy at any time, and could never achieve her desired goal. What's wrong? When Dempsey saw her resentful expression, he couldn't help but reach out and ruffle her long hair. Just now, when he saw her working, he was always in a bored state, so he wanted to take care of her a little. It's nothing. It's just that we don't finish today, which led to an increase in the workload tomorrow. Claire was angry at herself. After Dempsey heard it, he started chuckling and comforted her. Don't give yourself too much pressure. If you can't finish it, you don't have to do it. I can bring in a few more designers to share the work. Dempsey sure knows how to empathize with subordinates, but it can't solve the underlying problem. Claire's mood instantly improved. With this man's concern and gentleness, she seemed to not be as depressed as before. I don't want to see you frown like that, Yulong. If you don't insist on working, I could have let you play at home every day, Dempsey said with a serious face. I know you want to raise me, but I also know that women have to be a bit more independent. They can't rely too much on men, or else what will they do if they become detested in the future? Claire said shamelessly. Dempsey's handsome face tensed up, and he quickly made a firm promise. I will definitely not despise you. I'm afraid that I will despise myself. All right, I can solve the problem of work myself. Don't worry about me. Let's go downstairs and take a look. Claire tugged his arm, and the two of them walked down the stairs. At this moment, Joshua stopped the car, gently holding Elizabeth's small hand, only to realize that her hand was as cold as ice. It looks like forcefully bringing her here to see her family was indeed a very stressful matter. Lorena had already quickly walked out. When she saw her youngest son, she was very happy. Josh, I am just thinking, why aren't you here yet? Joshua smiled at his mother and saw that there were two tails behind his mother. Both of their heads were shaking out as they shouted at the same time, "Uncle!" Joshua gently caressed Emma's little head and said, "Wait, Uncle has brought a present for you." Why Uncle comes every time you bring us a present?" Emma was extremely happy. Joshua squatted down and answered with a smile, "Because Uncle likes the two of you." Joshua stood up and opened the door to the front passenger seat. "Hello, Auntie." Elizabeth lowered her head, not daring to look at Lorena's expression, because, in her heart, Elizabeth was very anxious, and was also very much blaming herself. Lorena said gently, "Eliza, don't be afraid. I won't blame you. It's cold outside. Come in." Elizabeth had already known that Lorena was a very good mother. Lorena had a gentle temper and was a kind person. It was all weird that Mom was too greedy and she also harmed for her marriage. Joshua extended his hand and firmly gripped Elizabeth's palm. "Let's go. My mother really isn't blaming you." "I know." Elizabeth heaved a sigh of relief. When they entered the living room, Dempsey and Claire walked down the stairs. Claire had already taken the initiative to greet them. "Eliza, you've come." Elizabeth also smiled and raised her head to look at Claire. Her amicable and kind eyes allowed Claire to calm down. Dempsey stood at the side and smiled. He exchanged glances with his brother secretly, then looked at their grandma who was sitting on the sofa, and the two of them walked towards her at the same time. Emma suddenly squeezed over, grabbed Claire's hand and asked curiously, "Mummy, Daddy said that she is our aunt, right?" Emma's voice was very loud and innocent, making everyone present freeze for a moment. Claire smiled and did not speak, but Joshua squatted down and smiled. "Do you like this ant that Uncle found for you?" "I like it. Ant is so beautiful." Emma immediately smiled happily. She was sweet. Elizabeth suddenly felt embarrassed. The little fellow seemed to be smeared with honey, causing her to not know what to do. Joshua knew that the main event was yet to come. Thus, he wrapped his arm around Elizabeth's waist, stood in front of old Mrs. Wilson, and said softly, "Grandmother, are you still angry with us?" The old lady looked at their faces and sighed. "I still have a few days left to live. I don't have that much time to be angry with you two." "Grandmother, please don't say that. You making us feel even more uncomfortable." Joshua could tell that his granny had agreed to them, so he immediately squatted in front of the old lady and took out all his skills and pretended to be obedient. The old lady glared at him. "Since young, haven't you been giving your granny too much trouble? You youngsters just need to enjoy yourselves as much as you want. I don't care about anything else now." After Elizabeth heard the old lady's words, she was already too grateful, so much that her eyes turned red. "Thank you, Grandma, for fulfilling my wish," Elizabeth said in a low voice. Old Mrs. Wilson sighed with emotion. "When you followed Josh into this house for the first time, I was very satisfied with you. In fact, Up till now, I have been very satisfied with you. You and Claire look very much alike, like a woman who will spend her days with my grandson. It is extremely important for you guys to take whatever kind of wife you marry, since you guys have experienced a lot, but you still insist on not giving up. Now that's the best choice. Then you'll have a good time. Old Mrs. Wilson's words made the atmosphere in the living room turn warm. Everyone let out a sigh of relief. Lorena, however, looked around at Elizabeth. Seeing her wearing a thick down jacket, she could not know how long for her pregnant. So she took the initiative to ask, "Your child is almost 5 months old. Time is really fast. I just heard that she was pregnant, and I didn't expect it to be 5 months now." Elizabeth's face was slightly red as she nodded. "Yes, I am pregnant for 5 months. Is the child very strong?" the old lady suddenly asked. Elizabeth's face became even redder. The child been moving quite fiercely recently. Dempsey and Joshua exchanged a glance, and then couldn't help but walk up the stairs, leaving these women to chat. They could go upstairs to find grandfather to chat. The old lady immediately asked Lorena, "When you were pregnant with Josh in the past, were you very strong too? I seem to remember you saying that." "Yeah, he's already so naughty in my belly. He's even more naughty now," Lorena said with a smile. Elizabeth was like a novel creature being sized up by the two. On the other hand, Claire snickered until Emma asked him, "Mummy, me and brother, were we in your stomach before?" All the adults were stunned, and then they forgot that there was a little fellow beside them. The old lady quickly helped Claire and said, "That's right. At that time you were living in your mummy's stomach with your brother. You two might have even fought a few times. I know my brother would hit me. He loves to bully me since he was young, so I couldn't win against him, so I become his little sister. Otherwise, I would be an elderly sister," Emma said with a serious face. After she finished speaking, she still had to glare at Frank, who was playing with his new toy by his side. Everyone was amused by Emma's childish laughter. It seemed that the little guy had a rich imagination. This was also the first time Elizabeth laughed from the bottom of her heart, because children were too cute. What was inside their heads was simply like a kaleidoscope.